Is the sugar in life extension enhanced zinc acetate lozenges a problem? Hi, I'm Chris Masterjohn, and I have a PhD in nutritional sciences. I am not a medical doctor, and nothing contained in this episode may be construed as medical or nutritional advice of any kind, or a substitute therefore. This episode is meant purely as scientific education. If you wish to act on any ideas presented in this episode, please consult your physician first, and never take anything herein as a reason to contradict medical advice. With that said, enjoy the episode. I know you recommend life extension enhanced zinc acetate lozenges. However, shouldn't we be concerned that they have 4 grams of sugar per serving, which could easily add up to 24 grams of sugar or more? Are there any other brands that you would recommend that have less sugar? If not, what brand of ionic zinc do you recommend? Particularly if you have any negative microbiome issues from consumption of sugar. So I know in my case, I had a problem tolerating them for a while because I didn't realize that I have a fructose malabsorption issue. And I believe what happened for me was that I had negative microbiome fructose metabolizing microbes that basically just crawled up my whole throat into my mouth. And so for a while before I got that under control, which I basically got under control by 3 to 6 months of a zero fructose, almost zero fructan diet, and a almost zero FODMAP diet, which wasn't fun. I mean, that basically meant meat and white rice. With, at one point I'd reintroduced bell peppers, which are low FODMAP. So, I mean, now, like, I'll eat ice cream occasionally and stuff like that. And so sugar, if I overdo the sugar, I do notice that creeping back up the tiniest bit. But in general, as long as I'm not being really irresponsible with sugar, sugar doesn't cause that problem for me. But when it did, when it was the case that I was getting I had a symptom in my esophagus that I'm still not sure what it was in terms of diagnostic criteria, but it felt like there was just like some gas gurgling up here. And so back then, the zinc acetate lozenges with their 4 grams of sugar dissolving in my mouth, probably feeding negative mouth microbiome bugs, did cause a problem for me. But I don't worry about it now. Now, the thing is with the zinc acetate lozenges, it's 4 grams of sugar per serving. And you don't want to be consuming, 40 grams of sugar or 60 grams of sugar every day. But in terms of a cold, I know of nothing more effective to stop a cold dead in its tracks than to intensively dose these upon the first semblance of a cold symptom. And, if you wait too long, their efficacy really declines. And if you follow the label at first, the efficacy may decline a lot. But in my experience, like if you sneeze and you think there's any possibility that there's a cold, and you start your first zinc acetate lozenge at that sneeze, and then you kind of see whether you sneeze again. And if you get the sense that it's persisting, you intensively dose them until it goes away. And then when it starts to have gone away, you finish the bottle at the dosing that the label recommends, as long as no symptoms come back. But if you have your first sneeze, then you take that as the symptoms coming back and you get more intensive with it. So in that kind of protocol, attuned to the progress of the potential cold, I find no alternative is more effective than the zinc acetate lozenges. And so therefore, I'm willing to consume 40 or 60 grams of sugar for like 1 day or 2 days and then have it taper off. Granted, I might have a totally different attitude if I had diabetes, but from a cost benefit analysis, I don't think consuming 40 grams of sugar once for a healthy person is going to cause any permanent damage. It's not the ideal thing, but the problem is that all the alternatives in zinc lozenges have generally involved factors that decrease the zinc ionization in the mouth. And so they're going to be less effective as a result of that. And I've seen some lozenges come on the market, but not any that don't violate the basic principles of the things you're not supposed to do to them or include in them in order to stop the zinc from ionizing in the mouth. And so I think from cold prevention perspective, I don't think they're replaceable at this point. And then for COVID-19, I haven't looked at it yet, but a colleague of mine forwarded me some case reports that seem to indicate. I haven't looked at them yet. I'm going to look at them tonight, but that apparently saw some promise of using these zinc acetate lozenges in COVID-19 cases. But due to the multiple mechanistic concerns where we would expect zinc to inhibit the replication of SARS-CoV-2, the coronavirus that causes COVID-19, even though there's no RCTs for COVID-19 like there are for the common cold, I think the zinc acetate lozenges make a lot of sense. And so from a preventative in the food and supplement guide for the coronavirus, I recommend using them like one a day. And then when you go out into a potential exposure, to use them before and after. Now, I would define potential exposure a little bit more narrowly for myself now that living in New York City, the pandemic is sort of really pushed down to borderline non-existent levels. So back when we were the epicenter of the pandemic, I was defining a potential exposure as going outside among people. Now, with cases having fallen to very low levels and not going back up, now I consider a potential exposure like when I go out to dinner and I'm much closer to other people than I otherwise would be, even though I'm outside. Those people are not that much further than 6 feet away, and we're all there for a couple hours talking the whole time. Or I go hiking and I'm out of state, or I'm, in a place I'm not usually at, where who knows who else is traveling to do that fun thing there, and it's crowded at the hiking place or something like that. In those intermittent events, I'll treat those as potential exposures. And that's partly, it's partly because there's 4 grams of sugar in each zinc acetate lozenge, and I don't want to be needlessly pounding sugar all the time, but I also don't want to needlessly be pounding zinc acetate all the time. Frankly, like, I find the zinc acetate lozenges very tolerable for the payoff that I get from them, but I don't exactly like the feeling of zinc acetate in my mouth. And it burns my mouth a little bit. And so I don't want to use them when I don't believe there's a good ROI from it. Yeah, and when someone comes out with a sugar-free version that actually looks like it fulfills all the criteria for cold prevention, then I'll start recommending it. But the serious problem is that these things already don't taste good, and taking the sugar out is going to make them a lot worse. Now, in terms of ionic zinc, I do have to say that I believe that ionic zinc spray is unambiguously inferior to the zinc acetate lozenges, in the sense that unless you're going to micro spray it every short period of time, you're dealing with something that is very much more intermittently dosed rather than continuously dosed. And so I think that you're going to have I haven't seen it studied, but I strongly suspect you're going to get less of a fraction of the dose of the zinc that you sprayed into your mouth actually permeating your nose and throat tissue compared to swallowing it, when compared to RJ says I should start selling a sugar-free zinc acetate lozenge. Probably I should do that. Yeah. But anyway, so the ionic zinc spray, let me quickly take a look at the one I have. I can see it in my orders here. 1 second. So I actually think that I've ordered a couple different ones, and I made the decision mostly based on the ingredients and the concentration. And I have used, so the most recent one I used is Zinc Best Liquid Ionic Mineral Supplement from Wellness One, which I bought on Amazon. And I believe that the people who make concentrates, I forget what the name of the company is, but their bottle looks very similar, so I think it's the same company. But if you put in like Trace Zinc in Amazon, it'll probably come up. But I'm pretty sure it's the makers of concentrates, but I'm not 100% positive. But anyway, I'm not too concerned about the brand because I'm not that familiar with the different brands, and I suspect that it's largely the same stuff. But anyway, that's my answer, RJ. Hopefully that helps. Thank you for your question.
This episode was part of a Q&A for members of the CMJ Masterpass, a buyer's club with exclusive and massive discounts on your favorite premium foods and health products, including pasture-raised and wild meat and seafood, supplements, sleep accessories, water filters, phototherapy devices, and much more. As a bonus, you also get to participate in monthly private Zoom Q&As with me. You can join the Masterpass at chrismasterjohnphd.com/masterpass and use the code Q&A, spelled out as Q-A-N-D-A, Q&A, for a 10% lifetime discount. For the remainder of 2020, I will be working full-time on finishing my Vitamins and Minerals 101 book while reserving a portion of my time for consulting clients. You can pre-order my book at chrismasterjohnphd.com/book. In my consulting, I am neither a medical practitioner nor a coach. I serve as your data analyst and your strategist. I teach you scientific principles of health and wellness, help you analyze your data, and help brainstorm actionable strategies. You can sign up for a consultation at chrismasterjohnphd.com/consultations. I will try to respond to comments here when I can, but my presence will be intermittent while I'm finishing my book. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next episode.